All right, beautiful people. So in today's video, we are going to be looking at how to get into flying FPV drones at any budget. See you in the video.
Controller's actually a really good option. Okay, let's pause the video for a minute because I do need to say something. I need everybody to know. I understand that when I say, $500 is not a lot of money and it's not going to break the bank. I understand that $500 is a lot of money, and I don't necessarily expect everybody to be ready to just run out and spend that kind of money getting their kit. All right, so I said $500 is probably the least amount of money that you're going to spend to get into this hobby, and today I'm going to show you guys how you can get into this hobby at any budget from $50 up to $1,000. So let's go. If you have $50, I'm going to recommend you get the Betaflight Light Radio SE2. It'll cost you about $24 if you buy it direct from Betaflight. It'll cost you about $40 if you buy it on Amazon. But an affordable radio like this, and then you buy a flight simulator. Now, there's three that I use: Velocidrone, Uncrashed, and Liftoff, and they all cost about $20. I'm going to say Velocidrone should be your choice, in that Velocidrone kind of takes you through racing, and it's more geared towards racing. So you're flying specific pathways through specific lines, and you're really learning how to use the controls. Now, some of the other ones lend themselves much more to freestyle and stuff like that, in which case you're kind of just flying around. And I think it's really important to learn how to fly with purpose. And so if you have $50, I'm going to say go ahead and get the Light Radio SE from Betaflight and a flight simulator like Velocidrone or Liftoff. At $100, my recommendation is not going to change that much. At $100, I would suggest going with the Radiomaster Pocket. And if you buy that direct from Radiomaster, or I believe on Amazon, it's about $65. And then again, you're going to get yourself a flight simulator like Velocidrone. You could actually get like two flight simulators. You could get Velocidrone and Uncrashed. And that way you can practice racing and you can start learning how to do some freestyle moves. Now, all of the flight simulators, one thing that's really cool is that they allow you to fly in angle and acro mode. So you can start learning in angle mode. So in angle mode, you're kind of more managing the throttle, and the drone will stick to the angle that you move the stick to. With acro mode, it's more like a rate. So as you move the stick over, that's going to change the rate at which the drone is rotating. So if I rotate to the right, the drone's going to tilt to the right, but then it'll stay at that angle when I recenter the stick. So you have to counter steer to the left to get the drone to level out. So Velocidrone and Uncrashed will both allow you to experiment with different modes. Actually, all of the flight simulators will. And the Radiomaster Pocket is a decent radio, and that's something that you can probably use for quite a while. Now, when you get up to $150, you can start looking at getting a radio that you're going to use for a really long time, like a forever radio. Now, I personally like the game controller style radio. So this is my Radiomaster Zorro. And you can get this in Express LRS. This is more of a multi-protocol version. And then I have an Express LRS module on the back. Now, one of the things about a more expensive radio is that it will have a bay on the back so that you can add a module to it. And that way, as protocols change, as people start doing things differently, you can get a module and put it on the back of your radio and be able to adapt as things change. So the Radiomaster Zorro, for example, is $100. And then that leaves you some room at a $150 budget to also get a flight simulator or two to help you kind of getting into the hobby.
Now, with all of these things, something that I will say, and I'm going to preach this forever, look around and talk to the people in your local community. Find out if there's a flight club, if there's a drone club, if there's people who fly drones in your area, and learn what they fly. Now, the reason why you want to do that is because there are different protocols in terms of your video connection and your radio. So if everybody in your area is flying digital, and that might be HD0, that might be Walksnail, that might be DJI, if everybody in your area is flying one of those protocols, then you're not going to have a good time if you get into this and just want to fly analog. Because as soon as one of them turns on their radio, you're going to lose reception and you're going to have a bad day. The same thing said, if they're all flying analog and you start coming in and you're flying digital, then you're not really going to be able to fly around them because your radio, your goggles, are going to interfere with their ability to fly, right? So knowing what's going on locally will definitely help you. But again, leading up to that, in the $150 budget range, you can look at getting a nice $100 radio, maybe a Radiomaster Pocket. If you like the square shape, a Radiomaster Boxer. Again, if you like the square shape, something with a screen on it that's configurable, or if you like the game controller style, a Zorro or something like that. Now, part of what makes this hobby so expensive is that the minimum you need in order to fly FPV is you're going to need a radio, you're going to need goggles, and you're going to need a drone. The most affordable goggles are going to cost about $100, and you can get a radio for in the $25 range, but then you have to add in the drone. So for less than a couple $100, there's really no way to buy all of this stuff in one go. And I don't want to put you in a position where you're going to have something that you can't use because you need to buy the next thing. So that's why I'm telling you to buy your radio first and get a simulator, because if you get the radio first and the simulator, then you can start learning how to fly, you can practice different moves, and you can really get into this without spending money on the other two parts. So the radio first, and then you can get your drone and your goggles. Now there's something else that people don't really consider, is that you're going to need to buy batteries and a charger. So a battery charger on the low end is going to cost you somewhere on the order of $50. And the batteries are going to cost, depending on the type of battery, at least $20 each. With tiny whoops, which I'll talk about later, that can be a whole lot more affordable, but you're still looking at adding another $50 to another $100 on top of whatever you buy for all of those little accessories. Something to consider. My recommendation at $200 is not going to be much different than my recommendation at $150. You can maybe get a slightly better radio, and I'm not saying that you should go out and buy the most expensive radio you can afford. Realistically, when it comes to flying drones, I've never used more than 4 switches in terms of getting everything all configured. That said, looking at a more expensive radio and then getting a flight simulator is probably your best bet to go. And again, reach out to your local drone community. If you learn how to fly in a simulator and you go hang out with your local flight club, chances are someone's going to have a drone and they'll let you have a turn flying it. That's the type of deal where you can start kind of getting into the hobby and you can start looking at things. Now, one thing you might do at $200 is, depending on the type of drones that the people in your local community are flying, you might be able to get a lower end or less expensive or more affordable pair of goggles, right? So your radio, you spend $100, and your like $60 or $70 or $80. Your goggles, you spend $100 or $80 to $100, and then you're going to get a flight simulator on top of that. and then you can go for rides. So basically you tune your goggles to the same frequency as somebody else is flying. And if they're flying analog, you can do that. And then you can ride along as somebody in your community is flying using your own pair of goggles. So you can kind of get a look and see how things are and see what's going on. That said, again, with the lower end goggles, the more affordable goggles, you're not going to use them long term. Eventually, you're going to save up and you're going to get a pair of goggles that are just yours, that are for you, that maybe have your prescription, or maybe they fit your face just right. Like, you're going to, at some point, upgrade all of this stuff anyway. The radio, though, a good radio is something that you can use for a really long time. I've had my current radio for the past 5 years or so, and I've really enjoyed it. And you know, the same goes for a lot of other stuff. Before that, I had a Gropner radio that I used for years. And so it's the type of deal where a good radio can last you for a really long time. And again, it's got that module bay on the back, so you can just add different modules as things change. At $250, things start to get interesting, and that is because there are a couple of kits out there that you can get into for a little over $200, which leaves you room to get a simulator. So a Tiny Whoop is a little drone like this, and you see it's got ducted props, so it's got guards around the props. It uses smaller batteries. It's got a smaller camera system. Now this is a digital drone right here, and you're not going to get that in this price range, but there are a couple of kits out there that I want you to look at and consider. So first of all, there's the Meteor 75 Pro kit from Betaflight, and that gives you a radio like this, an analog drone like this, and a pair of box goggles. And that leaves you room. It comes in at about $210, and that leaves you room so that you can get a flight simulator. That's going to come with 2 batteries and a small charger. Now, the thing about that is these little drones, they only get somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes of flight time per charge. So you charge up both those batteries, you can fly for maybe 10 minutes, and then you're back to charging your batteries again. So with a simulator, you can get much more flight time. You can get flight time in the simulator, practice in the simulator, plug in your drone, fly the 2 packs that you've got, you know, maybe put one on the charger while you're flying the other one. Hopefully something charges up enough that you can get going again, fly again, and then go back to the simulator. And by doing that cycle, you can practice different moves in the simulator, practice, get out your drone and try it with your drone and see how it goes, right? So you do it in the simulator first, do it in the simulator a bunch of times, and then try it with your drone. Now, something to consider and something to be aware of is at that price point, you're going to get something and eventually you're going to break it. When it breaks, you have to be ready to spend money to get back into the game and get back flying again. So this drone right here, for example, this post right here is broken, and I had to order a new set of screws and a new frame. Now the new frame was only $4, right? But it cost something like $8 in shipping because it's coming from China. And then I ordered a set of longer screws for it. You can't buy just 1 or 2 or 3 screws, so I had to buy 25. The screws were $25, and shipping was another $18, right? So getting that kit, right, the cost of entry is low, the cost of maintenance is going to get higher and higher. And so if your budget is $250, I would say, okay, you can buy your first drone at that point, and you're going to get something like either the Cetus Pro kit or the Meteor 75 Pro kit. And again, that's going to come with a pair of box goggles, an affordable radio, and a small little drone like this. At $300, you might want to break out and do some things on your own. So you might want to pick a drone that you really like for example, the Beta Air 75, that series, or the Air 65 series of drones. Those will cost you about $100. The goggles will cost you another $100 if you get an affordable pair. And then you could get a nicer radio like the Radiomaster Pocket, which will cost you in the order of $70 and still have room to buy your flight simulator. It'll get a little bit tight if you're throwing in batteries. But at that point, yeah, you might want to break out on your own and get Beta Air 65 2. I would say go with the freestyle version, which costs you about $100. The Radiomaster Pocket, the Beta FPVs, more affordable box goggles, they'll cost you on the order of $70 to $80, right? And then you're getting into that, you're running out of money at that point. Between that and the nicer radio and the batteries and the charger and all that other stuff, it kind of does add up pretty quickly. But yeah, in that $300 range, that's what I'd look at. And I'd throw in a flight simulator again. I can't stress that enough. And then again, go out and talk to your local flight club. Talk to the people who are flying near you. See what they're flying. At $600, I would say stick with analog. Go with a Meteor 75, the analog kit, for example, or you could just buy the drone independently, buy a better radio, so like a Radiomaster Pocket, maybe a Radiomaster Boxster. You're still going to be looking at those box goggles. I think they're the VR04s, and that will get you up and running. And then on top of that, you could look at an analog Darwin FPV Baby Ape, maybe the 2-inch, maybe the 3-inch, maybe the 3.5-inch even, depending on where you live. Now, when you get into the $700 range, you have some choices that you kind of need to carefully consider. Now, this summer, I'm going to Panama, and because I'm leaving the country, I'm going to be a little bit careful in terms of what I bring with me, because I've heard of people having trouble when they get to the border and they have DJI stuff. A lot of people have been saying that their DJI stuff has been confiscated at the border, and that's a little bit troublesome. So these are my DJI goggles N3, and these cost about $160, $150, depending on where you get them and when you get them. And they are digital. They have a big screen inside, they fit over your glasses, and they allow me to use the DJI 04 and the 04 Pro systems. Now, in the $700 range, you might be able to get into something like the Meteor 75 Pro 04, which either you can use this radio, which will cost you about $150 and works with a number of different drones, or you can get an ELRS version. Now, the ELRS version is about $100 more expensive, so the ELRS version of that drone will cost you about $300. And then you're going to get your $100 radio, and then you're going to have to get your goggles. And so that's, that's going to put you up close to $700, especially when you add in a flight simulator that you're going to be using to practice, right? But the other option at that point is to get a jack of all trades drone, something like this. So this is my DJI Neo 2. And what is unique about it is that it kind of works as a camera drone. So it's got this 2-axis gimbal. You can send it up, use it to take pictures. It works as a selfie drone. You can fly this drone without a controller at all. You can control this drone with your phone, and you can also use this drone to fly in manual mode, fly FPV using these goggles. Now, the reason why I am taking this, like this is the setup that I'm going to take to Panama, is because it is lightweight. It'll fit in my bag. Because I'm not buying it in Panama, I don't have to declare it. So I'll leave with it and I'll bring it back, and hopefully I don't get stopped at the border. And if I do get stopped at the border, it's going to be kind of weird and kind of awkward, but I can make the argument that, like, I bought this stuff in the United States. I took it with me when I left the country because I wanted to use my drone to take photographs, and none of this is on the ban list. Now, what this does, though, is it opens up things like the Pavo 20 Pro. This with the DJI 04 air unit will cost you about $300. with the goggles and the controller. Now, this is a fun drone to fly. It is a 2.5-inch drone, and it's got ducted props, which means I can fly this around my yard, I can fly this around parks, I can fly this around, and if I hit things, it's not going to damage things. Now, what this does, though, is it does add in the cost of a smaller drone if I want to fly around my house. So a smaller drone to fly around inside my house would be another $200 to $300, depending on how you go. But all in, you're still looking at about $700. You can get the flight simulator in there probably also, and that way for $700 you can get something cool that you can fly outside and have a good time with, and you can have that smaller drone that you can fly in the house, and you can fly your flight simulator. So if you wanted to go digital, $700 is probably the least that you're going to be able to do that for. And this is where you can start looking at combinations of drones like this. So $700 is about the first place where I would look to go digital. And really, if you need a jack of all trades drone, if I need a drone that I can fly around my yard in analog or in manual mode, that I can use to take pictures, that I can use as a selfie drone, then I might go with something like the Neo 2. But it's not going to be as good of an experience as something like the Pavo 20 Pro. So that's what I would say to do at $700, $800, somewhere in there. That's the route that I would go. Now, when I first started drones, I would come and sit on this bench, and this is where I would launch. Now, when I say that you should look around at the spaces that you have available, this is what I mean. Now, if you look, I used to fly down and do flips over that line of trees there. I used to do orbits around that clump of trees there. I used to try to do power loops where I would go up the front of that tree face there and come down to this tree here, right? And this was just an amazing place to come and fly. After a couple of years, these signs started popping up. And you can see how old this sign is. And there used to be a phone number that was clearly printed on there that people were supposed to call if they saw you flying a drone. Now, this sign here is behind glass, which I think has made it last a little bit longer. But here you can see, the type of sign. And there used to be a phone number on these signs, or a phone number around these signs that people were supposed to call. And then there you can see it says where you can call to report violators. Now, the thing is that over the years that I was coming here to fly, I was pretty much the only person that I ever saw fly here. And seeing those signs made me feel a little bit targeted, and it left a really bad taste in my mouth. If you're going to get into this hobby, definitely spend some time exploring your neighborhood, exploring your area, looking at the different parks that you have available to you, looking at the space that you have available to you at home. Tiny whoops are a great option. You can have a lot of fun learning how to fly a tiny whoop, and it really gives you the entire experience in a much smaller package. It opens up a lot of places that you can fly that you couldn't fly otherwise. Now, in my experience and over the years that I've been flying, I have found more and more limitations on where I can fly, when I can fly, how I can fly. Now, because I'm associated with the school district, I know that I'm allowed to fly at school and around the school grounds. And I believe that you can fly at some of the local schools. So, for example, the football field in Langley, or there's fields over there at the fairgrounds when nobody's using the fairgrounds as fairgrounds. There are also some fields in the Langley area. There are some parks out that direction, but all of those places are like a half an hour away from me. So realistically, it's the same driving to Langley or driving up to school. It's going to take me not quite the same amount of time, but close enough to it, that it makes more sense for me to just drive up to school, go fly my drones. That way I can maybe get some food or do whatever. take your time and make sure that you have places you can fly. Get in touch with your local flight club, your local drone organization, all of those things, so that you can learn what they're flying. And if you're an outliner, like if they're all flying model airplanes and you're the only person flying a drone, then you can really do whatever you want and you're not going to bother anybody. But if they are flying drones, or if there are people who are flying drones in your area, then you want to get to know them, want to get to know what they're flying, so that you can get a system that is compatible with them and not be stepping on people's toes. Again, analog is going to be your cheapest way in. Analog is your best bet. And it was a big deal for me when I switched over to digital. When I switched over to digital, buying a pair of goggles, the goggles were like $500. When I switched over to digital, the drones were much more expensive. Everything was much more expensive. And it was a big deal for me to get into flying digital drones. That said, once you're kind of in wherever it is you go, if you're in with analog, if you're in with digital, if you're in with whatever, once you kind of get over that first initial hump, getting other stuff or getting new drones or getting other stuff, it's kind of like you kind of get led down a path, and that's kind of the path that you follow. Please do not just go out and buy the biggest, fastest drone you can. Understand that there are going to be strict limitations on places that you can fly, and you don't want to learn the hard way that you got too much drone. Start out small, start out with something like a tiny whoop and work your way up. And definitely get a flight simulator and get a radio first, so that you can practice flying and you can learn how to fly using a simulator instead of learning how to fly by breaking things and spending money. All right, I hope you find this helpful, and I will see you guys later. All right, everybody, I hope you in turn enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.